Test, test. Testing, testing. I see you troublemakers up there. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our All Councils meeting on December the 15th, 2023. I've talked to a couple colleagues, and they said this is our absolutely favorite kind of meeting throughout the year, and we have them twice a year. So thank you all for coming. I would have to say I find these meetings really useful as well. I'd like to acknowledge the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Chinootan peoples. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. So just before I kick off presentations, can you put your hand up if you've never actually been in this chamber before? A few people, not everybody. So welcome if this is your first time. Please come back. Our first presentation this afternoon is on a very exciting housing initiative. I'd like to call Tim Anderson, CAO for the City of Waterloo, to introduce his presentation.
All right, thank you, and thank you, Chair Redmond. I guess I should say all the best of the season of many holidays, because that's the season we're in. So great to be here. It's my pleasure on behalf of my CAO colleagues to introduce Phil Mills. Phil is the Chief Executive Officer of Habitat for Humanity Waterloo Region, and he also leads the group called Build Now Housing Project. And the area CAOs have been meeting a group of local developers, not-for-profits, industry representatives, over the last year to understand the challenges and opportunities around a housing model that would have a vision for an at-scale build. The housing model update comes at an important time, as we know, in our community. Housing challenges around our housing targets, interest rates, construction costs, you name it, they're all colliding at once. So this model really intersected nicely, not only with our need in the community for housing, but also the federal programs around the Housing Accelerator Fund. And much energy went into collective applications throughout 2023 to a total of $113 million in applications, representing just under 6,000 new housing units across our region. We're still in the waiting mode on all the announcements related to HAF, but we thought this is a timely point in time for Phil to represent the Build Now project and the vision for this community and what potentially could be a model for us moving forward. So I'll turn it over to Phil, and I'll be back up here to respond to questions with Phil following his presentation.
Thanks, Tim. Afternoon, everyone. Everybody hearing me okay? All right. So I get the pleasure to talk to you today about Build Now Waterloo Region. And while I'm the one that's up here today, I think it's important right from the get-go that everybody knows this isn't just something Habitat's doing. We have a huge groundswell of support behind this project. We've got folks from the business community, we've got folks from the not-for-profit, from the development community, from the education community, from the healthcare community. We have all sides of our community behind this project. So when you see me up here talking today, this isn't just something that I've dreamed up or that we're at Habitat think is a good idea. We have a huge number of folks, and a number here today, even with us, other housing providers behind this project. So I want that to be kind of clear right from the get-go. This is a community idea, this is a community initiative, and something we think can make transformative community impact. So to start, I always kind of start with the issue because I think it's easy to forget. We understand that housing is expensive and that's not as easy as it once was, but I think it can be really hard to understand exactly how bad it is. So looking at some data that I found the other day on available rentals, we were seeing that average rents were up over $2,300 a month. And if you look at the Waterloo Region Association Realtors website, they'll tell you the average residential property went for about just over $750,000. And so when we talk about affordable housing, we're talking about this especially within Habitat context and other sort of places around, we're thinking about 30% of your income. So if you're paying $2,300 a month, or you have a mortgage on a $750,000 house, you need to be making $92,000 a year to afford the average rental in the region, or you need to be making over $190,000 a year to have an affordable mortgage. And I know for most of us, that doesn't sound particularly affordable, and it certainly doesn't sound like the average person, where we're talking about $92,000 just to rent. And so that was the issue that really drove us to try and find something that doesn't just do a little bit, but something that has a transformative impact on our region, because this is everywhere and it is really bad. So what did we come up with? The idea is 10,000 homes. Not a small number, we realize, but the issue is big enough that it requires something that's a bit more than just, as we would say, nibbling around the edges. So we want to do 10,000 homes. 70%, 7,000 of them would be affordable ownership. 30% or 3,000 would be affordable rental. And the goal is that when time comes to sell the affordable ownership, they would be half the market price. So we're trying to create a perpetual opportunity for ownership and a mass influx of affordable rental. The intention for these is to be that missing middle, that stuff we talk about saying we need more of, if only we could find, if only somebody would build. And so we're looking at 3 to 6 story buildings, because that's the most efficient way and also the most cost-effective way to get reasonable density, but also not to fundamentally change the landscape of everything we're dealing with. We're not talking about putting massive high-rises everywhere. We're talking about a gentle densification, and we're talking about 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. And I think that's the other key to this project that is often missed. If you look at a lot of new developments, there are a couple of 2 bedrooms, sometimes a 3 bedroom unit, but not a lot. What we're looking for is ensuring that this is not just what is most cost effective, but what does the community actually need? So we're putting in units that are for families, putting in units that are for folks that can't fit into a 1 bedroom condo. So we're trying to look at the broad spectrum of need in the community and fill a gap that currently isn't being met by the market. The part that makes this, I think, most exciting, aside from being 10,000 units, which I think is pretty exciting, is this is going to be affordable forever. This is not a one-time thing. This is something that when we invest into this will be in our region and in our community for as long as we need it. The rentals will be owned by not-for-profits. We have a bunch of amazing partners who've already come on board, signed to say they want to be a part of this project, some of them with us here today, which we really appreciate. They're going to be in, and they'll be owning and operating to make sure these rentals are what they need to be. They're affordable, and they're there forever, because that's what they do. They're trusted not-for-profits and trusted community charities who will make sure that these are what we need. Habitat ownership experience is going to ensure that all 7,000 ownership units stay affordable forever. So using the experience that we have over 35 years in the region and across the country, leveraging the experience that we have as a national brand, we're going to be able to we know how to ensure that these stay affordable as long as we need them. So it's not just a one-time thing where a family gets to buy a house and then that's lost to the market. These will be affordable in perpetuity. There'll be no investors and there's no flipping. This is for owner-occupied. This is for families. This is for people who need housing. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. This is not something for somebody who wishes that they can find a way to make extra money. This is for a family that says, I want to own a home, or I want to be able to afford where I live. We're going to give them that chance back. So the obvious question always is, how on earth are you going to do that? And there's 3 major things that make this project sort of go. The first is going to be land. We are looking to work with local partners, both in municipalities, not-for-profits, or concerned citizens, to look for low cost to free land. One of the major drivers for development, as you would know right now, is the high cost of land. So if we can get the land for free, we see a massive drop in the cost to develop. The second part is we have a number of developers willing to work for free. They're going to remove their profit margin and just work to cover cost and administrative expenses. So taking out developer profit, taking out the cost of land, the cost that we can develop at and cost that we can sell at plummets. The last piece is done by the provincial government with Bill 23. Bill 23 removed development fees for affordable housing, specifically for charities and not-for-profits. We happen to be a charity, and so this applies to us. And so what we're looking at is then seeing the costs associated with the development charges waived. So by waiving all 3 of these different areas, by having no cost for the land, by not having profits placed into the eventual cost or the eventual purchase price and not having development fees, we think we can get the housing, well, we know we can get the housing down to about half price. So I'm going to take a pause for a second because A, I don't love hearing the sound of my own voice, but B, I'm talking kind of quick. Any questions so far? I know Tim's going to give me a hand, but just looking around, is that making sense? I'm seeing heads nodding, sort of. Awesome. All right. So we'll go into just a bit more detail around exactly how this would actually work from a process standpoint, because I know that sounds great, but how would this actually work in practicality? So if we're talking about the ownership model, what we'd be looking at is Habitat would take possession of a land asset. We're hoping to find partners, like we said, who are going to be able to transfer us free or nominally costed land. Habitat as a charity takes on, and that is really important. One of the reasons why that's such an important part of this is that we know that if we're talking about municipal assets or talking about donations of massive land assets, this needs to be somebody that you can trust. And the hope is that the community trusts that Habitat, as a charity that's been in this region for a long time, focused exclusively on affordable housing, can trust that we are going to put the best interest of the community forward. That you can trust us, trust our board, trust the people that have given a lot of time, energy, and commitment to affordable housing to do just that, to good, affordable housing development. And so you give the land to us, and then we move forward to ensure that this is created in an ethical and appropriate sort of way. The next step is we work with Grand Valley Construction Association, a locally known not-for-profit that deals in construction tendering, for a clear and open, transparent tendering process where we will tender out the actual construction of 7,000 homes. Now again, the intent here is not that although I'll take a step back, if we got a huge chunk of land where we could do 7,000 all at once, that would be amazing. That's not what we're expecting. We're expecting is an opportunity here to develop in multiple phases. And so with each phase, land is given in, we then tender out the process, and in that tendering process, we outline costs, we outline any sort of fees, done clear and transparently for anybody who's interested. But one of the big things is that whoever is accepting or replying to that tender does need to accept that they are not going to be making a profit. This is not a way to be making money off of our community. This is not a way to be, growing profit margins. This is an opportunity to make something transformative happen in the region. So they review. Then, in partnership with local real estate agents, we're going to vet potential candidates. This is not just an open free-for-all. We're going to be targeted. And the beauty of something this big is the opportunity to target a broad spectrum. Traditionally, if anybody knows anything about Habitat, we focus on families. So all of our homes, and the homes that we've sold historically, have been to families. Because in part, we don't have the massive opportunity to say, hey, how many people can we help? Who needs all of the help? We have said this is the niche area that we're going to fill in the community. But in this market and in this plan, with 7,000 ownership, we don't have to say this is just families. We have the opportunity to be really broad in saying who needs this and how do we make systemic impacts across the community. So we don't have to be particularly narrow. We can be broad spectrum, but we will, again, because these are affordable, be looking for folks who need affordable housing. If you're in a position where you don't need affordable housing, this is not the type of thing that we're necessarily targeting for. So we vet potential candidates, and then suitable owners purchase from us. Same as we have always done in the past. It's a purchase. Everybody who buys from a Habitat now, they buy and own the home. What we do is we register an option agreement on title, which puts some controls and restrictions on the way in which the home is eventually sold. And that's how we ensure that this is affordable in perpetuity. So rather than this being something that is sold out to open market, this option agreement that we've been working on and using for many years, tested in court, protects the asset so that it stays affordable and stays doing the things we've always said that it needed to, so we can fulfill our promises, not just to our donors, but to the community at large when we talk about a project like this. When it comes to rental, relatively similar. Habitat takes possession of the land, working with GVCA, we tender out the construction, and then at the end, we're going to make sure that those building assets are owned and operated then by not-for-profits. These are not going to be given to a developer, or a developer is not going to hold them and rent them at whatever, an affordable or market rate. These are going into the hands of not-for-profits so that it enriches both our not-for-profit partners by having an asset that they can carry, leverage against to build more homes, but also ensuring that this will be affordable in perpetuity because that's what they do. Not-for-profits and charities are by law required to keep doing the thing that they were given their status for. So they're going to continue to ensure these are affordable in perpetuity. And so what we've done here is created 10,000 homes within our community. And if we need more in the future, we can just do more of this. The opportunity to continue to build on this is always there for us. But at a first attempt, 10,000 seemed like the right place to start. And so we're going to try this. We're going to build these homes, opportunities for families to own and rent in an affordable way that just doesn't exist within the market right now. I don't know, is there anybody here who likes numbers? Number folk? Usually a couple of them. So there's always that sounds great, can you actually do this? So here are the numbers. And if you need to, the stuff is in the package, you can look over them later. But this is a project that one of the partners we've been working with, the Maxwell Building Consultant folks have been working on. And that just gives you a rough outline of exactly how we would get there. So you can see if you want to look through all the math, it exists. But what you start to see there is the total project costs and then our average unit prices. And we start to see that we're looking at being able to sell units at one-bedroom units, we're looking at $280,000. Be looking at a two-bedroom unit at $330,000 and a three-bedroom at $400,000. So far below current market costs, and that still is actually within then that entire price point. So if you see the project cost, the build price is being $19,800,000, and then the projected value if we sold would be $20 million. So just over the costing. So the math works, and we say this just to say we're not kind of hoping, we're not guessing. This isn't a pie in the sky sort of idea, or wouldn't it be nice? We've done the math, and this can work. And this is before we start layering in any other sort of projects. If anybody has heard, there was some work done by the government around the removal of HST on purpose-built rentals. Well, you'll note that there's $913,000 of HST built into this project. If the HST is waived, the project cost goes down from $19 million down to just closer to $18 million. And so what we can start to do is we can start to layer out the actual costs. If we have, pardon me, if we have grants, if there are subsidies, if there are other sort of investments available, if we have community partners that come around and help us reduce the cost of construction again, all of those things reduce our costs, and if the cost goes down, our price to sell goes down. So this isn't, again, a pipe dream, this isn't a wish. The math works right from the get-go, and it can only get better. And so I'm excited about this because we look at this and say $280,000 for a one-bedroom, unit is the type of thing you can't find anymore. But to be able to do that on scale and en masse across our entire community is exciting to us. And hopefully it's exciting to everybody within this room because we think this is the type of thing that does have the opportunity for transformative change within the region. So the next question is obviously then, where are we going? What happens next? So we're working at land acquisitions. We're working with our local partners to talk about what land could be available, where we could perhaps purchase land, or hopefully have free land transferred to us. We have partnerships agreements getting put in place. We have a number of not-for-profits who have already signed on. We have business community that has signed on to work with us. And we're working with anybody and everybody. The intent of this was never, and I said this, I was intentional from the start when I said this is not a habitat project, this is a community project. We have a huge number of folks from across the community who are invested and involved in this project. And so we're getting those signatures. We're getting those agreements to say, not only have we said in word, we're getting the signed details to say, yes, we're going to be a part, we are partnering in with this. We have not-for-profits for rental already lined up. Again, a couple of them are here with us today. We have the backing of the community to do this. And the next step then is we're establishing working groups. So we have working groups to help us. We have family selection, because we have to figure out exactly who this is going to get to and make sure it gets to the right people and the people that make the most sense for the community. We want to make sure that we are designing this in a way that is wise. Everything can't be the same. We can't make one unit and assume that everything is going to be the same. The needs of the community are broad, and so our design needs to be broad. So we want to make sure that we are designing this both for the needs of the folks that are going to be in there, realizing that this is going to mean that these need to meet, not just build standards, but what does our community actually need? Who in our community needs housing, and make sure that we're being intentional to build to the needs of the community right from the get-go. And then we also have land acquisition and a whole bunch of other sort of folks. We have some design folks we're meeting with in the future to say, hey, what could this stuff start to look like so we can start to get at planning these sort of things. So there's a bunch of working groups that are feeding into this again, because this isn't a habitat project in the sense of this isn't something that I'm doing as an organization on our own. We're just at the front of a huge groundswell of people who are working together to make something, again, hopefully community transformative happen. So I'm gonna pause there and see Tim, if you want to come up and give me a hand with some of this, that'd be great. We've got questions, yes. I have no idea. And for those that didn't hear, the question is there a method? And I don't know. Do we have a method that we want to be using here?
I can yell, that's cool, I like that.
Perfect.
Thank you. So I love this idea. I'm really excited about it, and I'm going to pump it all over the place. But there's one piece of it that scares me, and that's the vetting or making sure the right people get the housing. right people seems like a subjective judgment to me, and so I'm wondering how you're going to address that. And I do have another question in a different vein, but
Sure.
we'll see if there's time for that.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic question. I mean, like you said, the right people is going to be subjective, and there is a measure of subjectivity to that. And that's why we're trying to be careful that this isn't something we're doing on our own. So we're going to work with local housing partners and local folks within the community, say who is in need of housing, what types of populations, what types of communities, to make sure that we're going to articulate this. The benefit of something this size, and this is part of what I talked about earlier when we said Habitat works with families, but it's tough because we're only building, our new project on Shantz Hill is going to be 24 units. That's 24 families. That's not transformative. The opportunity with something transformative is that we can be broad with the spectrum of need, because we're going to have 7,000 homes as opposed to 24 homes. But when we talk about need, it's going to be informed by community consultation and community experts. So who else is working in the housing sector saying what need looks like, what communities are in need, what folks need to have some housing within their populations, and we can then use that to help guide us to make sure that this is getting to the folks who need it. And when I say need, I think the distinction here is, I don't need a house right now. I own a home. My family is secure in that space, and I'm very fortunate to be in that case. I should not be able to buy one of these homes because I don't need it. And I think what we're trying to make sure is that this gets to people who have not been as fortunate as some of us who got into housing before housing went nuts. And so we're trying to be smart and intentional about where that goes.
Great, thank you. And I hope that fair safeguards are a continual consideration. My second question, if there's time for that, knowing that the population is aging and acquired disabilities are on the rise, and also more and more babies are being born with disabilities thanks to technology, I'm wondering how much of the proportion is designated accessible housing and or universal design oriented?
So we haven't set targets on all of those numbers yet. There is I was going to say obvious, but the goal here, or the plan, is to make sure that there's lots of available. And we talked about need a second ago. Having come from a place, a previous employment that dealt with folks who were living with permanent physical disabilities, the understanding of how impossible it is to find accessible housing is not lost on me. And so that's when we start talking about need. What does that look like? So not just designing, to standard, but what does need look like? And so if the building code's going to say we need X number of accessible units, is that what our community needs, or is our community need something more than that? And so I think this is where we get to be informed by the partners and informed by the people we're asking when it comes to design opportunities to say, hey, how do we make sure that this is actually meeting a need versus, a guess?
I'm glad you're mindful of all of that, because accessible housing is accessible for everyone, not just folks with disabilities.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Aging populations. Or I also appreciated, I have 3 young boys who I used to push around in a stroller. And my goodness, it was awfully hard to get them in somewhere that wasn't accessible. So this isn't something that only impacts a particular part of the community. We all kind of have that. Who's next?
Right here. Hi. My question, I'm interested in the conversations that you're having with the home builders. And if they're signing up and there is no profit in it for them, sort of what their goal is, and if it is just community, giving back to the community, or is there something, that they're looking for as well?
I think there's multiple wins for our home builders that we're partnered with at this time. So yes, there is altruism in the sense like, hey, we live here. If you talk to the folks who are involved, they live in this community. They understand how hard it is. And so the idea of saying, hey, what does a healthy and appropriate community look like? I want my kids to grow up in a healthy community that makes sense. So I think there is some that kind of general altruism. There's also the reality that if you are a home builder right now, builds are slow. And so how do you make sure that you keep your staff busy? Because you don't want to lose your staff to other places. Or if you're a home builder and you're trying to actually build, who's doing the building? If you can't afford to live here, where's our skilled trades going to be? They're going elsewhere. And so there's the idea of the economic ripple effect where skilled trades are leaving because they can't afford to live here. Well, if you want to keep building, you're going to need to have those folks in this community to be able to continue. So I think that there are knock-on economic impacts to the builders. And I don't say I think, that's what they've told me. They kind of said there are knock-on economic benefits and impacts to the community, as well as these are good people. They care about their community. They want to do something good for the region.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Phil. So first of all, let me begin by saying thank you for the passion and the work that I know you and the rest of the team have been putting into this. And I know Scott Higgins and the HIP development team and Momentum, and I see GVCA there and Union Co-op and everyone here with you. And I know over the past number of months, you guys have been doing a lot of great work along with other community partners and the CAOs on this. I guess my question for you is on land pieces. because there's really kind of two scenarios that I see. Certainly, larger chunks in some ways are easier to work with, but often are less accessible to transit and those kinds of things. Smaller chunks, would allow probably more to happen quicker because we can find those easier and are already, potentially part of infill. Are you open to both, or is there, minimum sizes? I know notionally at one time you folks were talking 5 or 10 acres, but we can probably find a couple acre sites easier as an example. Or are you open to both as an example to move this forward?
I think at this point we're still looking for sizable chunks. There are some real benefits when it comes down to finding the costing and keeping the costing low. So what we're trying to do is find how do we keep this as accessibly priced as possible. And if we're going to redesign, designing one, community on 10 acres versus designing 10 different plots with 10 different topographies and 10 different areas on 1 acre lots, it is going to increase the price. And so I think our focus has tried to be, how do we make this as accessibly priced as possible? And so scale has been one of those things. Now, realizing transit and that stuff does make sense, but I have, to say, thank you to the region and the regional staff, who've been a part of these conversations. They've been really good in saying, look, if you're going to put 2,500 units somewhere, then we'll talk about how we get transit out to that. So I think the region's been really supportive in making sure that, we can make a reasonable solution. This can be a planned collaborative thing, because the intent of this has never been, and I know this is not what you're insinuating, but this is a collaborative thing. So we're going to try and figure out how do we do this with all of our partners. But as it stands right now, our goal is looking at larger chunks, just because the opportunity for cost savings diminishes the smaller the piece of property we get to.
No, I get that, but I guess I would encourage you from the municipal perspective, where a lot of the planning work lies and is going to lie, to really open your minds to smaller pieces, because it'll make it more, it'll increase the potential of how much we can engage with you on this.
Thanks, appreciate that.
I think I'm next. I was going to start do you want me to start some Christmas songs, or just, no, just ask my question. Thanks for coming in and explaining this to us, and thanks for the work that you've been doing over the past year. And I know our council in Waterloo has had some conversations about this, and we're, hopeful that there will be that 2024 will bring some opportunities to really start to move some of these forward. But just a couple of questions. When you put the slide up about the different costs involved, curious about what the consultancy fees are. I imagine some people have questions about that. If you could just explain what that $800,000 is for. I'm not saying it's not completely legitimate, but I think just so we understand it. Also just wanted to understand when you were saying that, you could leverage funding from other nonprofits. I'm wondering, specifically around First Nations communities, like if there's a possibility to work directly maybe with some groups like that too, because we know there's a great need for that specific population, and if it's possible to work with them and maybe access some additional dollars or different dollars, and how that might work. And then I also just, maybe Tim or you could just explain how, the procurement side of this might look like for municipalities, because we know we have a pretty stringent procurement processes. Thank you.
Awesome. So I'll start with consultant fees, and I'm going to look towards some of my friends over here to make sure I'm not missing anything. But when I look at some of the consultancy fees when we're talking about this, we'd be looking at things like engineering drawings, we'd be looking at soil testing, we'd be talking about kind of those sort of things. So this is the design drawings, that kind of stuff is what's getting into those consultant fees. So try to keep the budget in a broad spectrum, big bucket type thing, but that's the type of stuff that tends to go into that category to make sure that we've got buildings that are efficient, that are safe, that are meeting code, all of that kind of stuff. When it comes to partnerships, absolutely, that's the type of folks we're working for, and we have some good partnerships already established with local Indigenous providers and folks who are going to be working with us. And so that comes down to some of those working groups where we can say, hey, what do we need to know when we're designing this to make sure this meets the needs of the particular communities, whether it be an Indigenous community, whether that be a community that has some level of disability, whether it be a community who's experienced some measure of poverty. Like, what does that look like, and what do we need to take into account so we build this for you that fits with your needs and the realities of your community. Tim, I don't know if you want to talk about the process stuff. Yeah. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, thank you. And thanks, Mayor, for the question. Yeah, process-wise, I think what we're doing today is we're hearing one model of housing delivery possibility in our region, and it's an exciting model. Locally, amongst the area municipalities, the CAOs have been talking about forming up an advisory group, really to kind of coordinate amongst ourselves to respond to some of the questions around land and what are the opportunities, is there a possible fit here? And then to build a consistent procurement approach where we could go to the market, open it up and see if there's other models that should respond to this community and help us. I think it's been a stimulus for conversation for us. I think it really helped generate some really productive input into our Housing Accelerator Fund applications. And I think we're charged up. This is an at-scale model, one that we haven't heard about before in this region. So excited on that front, but there are some process steps. So thank you.
Other questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Philip. Your presentation was really enlightening, and of course, appreciate the great work that Habitat does do, where you guys as an organization don't necessarily only help to provide affordable housing, but you're also assisting with the economic uplift of those families, right? So I agree with what Tim said, that you guys are one part of that pie piece, but there needs to be many other models that need to work in conjunction. And Mayor McCabe kind of did a precursor to my question about the consultancy fees. That looked at almost 5% of the overall cost, which seems to be on the low end, actually. It can be much higher. Speaking of that, could it help where the cities could have some of the consultancy services that they could provide, that they could have the necessary staff that could provide that support to the affordable housing builders and partners, so that we can limit those costs? Again, I'm sure you can partner up or you can find those services out there, but at the end of the day, when those agencies perhaps are even providing at a cost, those costs include very expensive offices and shiny, operating costs, and they still tend to be on the high end. Could that be a cooperative model?
It's absolutely possible. I think there's the opportunity for lots of partnerships, and I think we've heard from folks in all different areas, whether it be from design or from architecture, saying, hey, we want to be involved in this, and the opportunity to say, hey, we could do something on the cost, but we're careful that when we start talking budgeting, I always talk, like our CFO at Habitat is great for this. The earnings or the expected revenue is always low and the expected expenses are always high, because you want to be really prudent. And so what we're trying to present is a really prudent budget. We think we can get these numbers lower, but want to be careful not to make a promise I can't keep. And so those numbers, there are folks who I think would do better, and there are probably some really great partnerships that can on scale really lower those costs. But we want to make sure that when we're coming forward, we're not saying, so predicated on a whole bunch of people cutting their fees, we think we can get this done. What we have is we have commitments from developers who are saying, we'll cut our costs, our profits, and that's enough, coupled with the free land and the development charges, to get this low. And then everything on top of that means lower housing or cheaper housing, or I guess less expensive. I'm always careful to say cheaper, and I apologize, because it isn't cheap. This is well-built, quality stuff, and we're trying to get it at the lowest cost to the consumer as possible.
I just quickly want to say, though, again, you mentioned the Shants Hill site. It may be 20-plus units. It may not seem transformative, but when you have those 20 units spread across the communities throughout the region, that does 100-plus sites. That is in itself transformative. And the benefit of that is the fact that you have it dispersed well. And again, those that are looking for affordable housing, they have access to services and amenities across the cities, as opposed to just to one area where it's 1,000-plus units built in one spot. So just
the hope would be that we are able to do this across the entire region. I think you're right. There is value. You also want to make sure you're giving people choices. If this is a project that is only in one community, only in one city, we want to make sure the folks have choices to live, work, and play, to have homes and housing near where they work and near where their communities are. So we'd love to have opportunities to build across the totality of the region, including the townships.
So we have a question online from Councillor Vasic.
Oh, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Oh, hi. Thanks for your presentation. I'm really glad to start learning more about this. And I have two questions. One is probably not one for today, and one is a clarifying question. And one is, I'll be really curious to understand how the procurement works as you move forward, because you were saying that Habitat would be responsible for procurement, but then the cities, like municipalities, have their own procurement processes. And so I'd be curious how those two will interact, or if at all. If you can speak to that now, go ahead. But if it's a down the road question, that's also totally fine.
I can, yeah. So the intention here and why this is something where we're saying that Habitat would take possession of the land is that it removes this from municipal procurement requirements. So we can procure as we would as a normal for all of our build projects. So it's a faster approach. We're going to partner with Grand Valley Construction Association to make sure that the tendering and those sort of work is done transparently, because we want to make sure that this is open and transparent to the community, but we aren't necessarily tied to regional or city procurement processes, so we can move a little bit faster.
Okay, yep, that's great. And my second question is probably related to how fast you speak, which is really at lightning speed, it's true. And it's about the finances, which I mean, I hope everybody in the room and online is interested in, even if it's not our jobs outside of this, but it's our big responsibility. So my curiosity is about the HST, which I think you said the province removed that requirement for purpose-built rentals. But then it looked like that would be waived these as well. But then my understanding was these would be ownership. So probably just I'm misunderstanding something along the way.
No, I think it's a great question. Yeah, and my apologies. I was telling myself the entire time to slow down, so that was me talking slowly. Again, apologies. Yeah, and so what we tried to show again was kind of a budget that works but doesn't have all of the best case scenarios. So that particular budget would have been for an ownership model. HST is waived on purpose-built rentals. So in the budget that you would have seen, that kind of proposed possibility that HST would be waived on purpose-built rental buildings, it wouldn't be waived on an ownership building. Now, Habitat is doing a lot of work to advocate for waiving HST on purpose-built affordable ownership. That's not something that's through yet. And so without that there, we try and say, worst case scenario, if we're having to pay HST on these buildings, this is still viable. So this isn't if we can get some policy changed at a federal level, if we can do this, it can maybe work. It's in our current environment, this could work. And in certain circumstances, it's better than we were able to present today.
Okay, so and the ownership prices that you presented for the 1 to 3 bedrooms, were HST included or excluded?
Those were HST included. And again, some of that stuff is predicated on today. I don't know if any of you recall, but a couple years ago, there was a pandemic and prices changed. And so we're working with today's pricing, we're working with what we have in front of us. There's the possibility that construction costs could go through the roof or continue to rise. And so what we're trying to say is, based on where we are right now with our current environment, we can make this work. There is a bit of an impetus, with that to say, so quicker is better. If we can move quicker on this, if we can start sooner, we don't have to wait for things. The general sense is that stuff is not going to get cheaper. It's only going to get more expensive. So the longer it takes to kind of get ourselves moving, the higher this cost is going to be. And that cost is eventually borne by the person buying the home. So we're hoping to get this down as much as possible.
Thanks so much.
From up here, you're behind my left here, which is why I keep looking. If it's wondering why I'm thinking
I know. Thank you so much.
How am I doing, Karen?
Over here with the mic.
Hey.
One more? Okay.
Oh, last question. Uh-oh, that's too much pressure. I guess for me, the elephant in the room here is the land, and you sort of talked about it a little bit, but I'm wondering if you can elaborate on how the process of finding land and working with municipal and the other partners that you had referenced is going. And I guess from my perspective, some of the consortium of developers who are a part of this process, I guess I'm cognizant of the fact that they also own a lot of land in the region, and I'm curious if there has been any conversations with those developers about utilizing their land for this project.
So I think the conversations are going well. The cities have been, and the CAO group specifically has been really receptive to conversation with us. We've been meeting with them for quite some time, which is lovely. We've been talking for about a year about, hey, this is the project. What could it look like? There are processes that need to go through, and there are sort of, we have to make sure that this is, transparent and clear and obvious and appropriate in all ways. So there's lots of stuff and steps to go through. And, so cities have, they have inventories, they know what they've got. And so we've been talking about, is this something, at a high level that you think you could engage with? And so that's kind of where we're at. We are hoping that cities will be able to continue to kind of move forward and say, this is something we're excited about, we want to do, and can partner with us on. When it comes to developer land, we have had conversations. The reality of it is that, we'd be back to then a market purchase. These are for-profit companies that have bought that for, and so they could be a conversation saying, hey, I could, and we could look at my land, but as soon as we get into market purchasing of that, one of the major pillars of making this affordable for families or for folks involved disappears. And so there is that real need, which is why we've gone to, partners who are invested in this. So saying to the cities, hey, is this an opportunity for you to say, hey, you don't build houses really, and housing's a huge issue. What assets can you bring to the table to try and ask everybody to do what they do best? The city's going to be judicious in their sort of work. We're going to build the houses. We're going to make sure it gets to the right folks. We're trying to find a good balance around what everybody can bring to the table in kind of a fair partnership.
So there's one last question online. I think it's Councillor Wright.
Okay.
Hi there. Just a question following up on Mayor Branovic's comment about leveraging smaller parcels of land and our potential capacity to be more nimble and maybe accommodate those larger suites, the 3 bedrooms. Are we taking any actions to advocate for single staircase design so that we can get sort of that lower density infill opportunity on the table? I know Seattle has already done that. Vancouver looks like they're advocating with the BC government to get that onto the suite of options for housing, and just wondering what we're doing in terms of an actionable workaround to our current restrictions.
So we're not doing a ton of advocacy as it relates to some. There is some things that we're looking at that would help us build more and build, faster. But right now we're careful to be trying to focus in on where can we get these units. And I think the other question always to bear in mind is that, what opportunity are we creating or what sort of disadvantage are we creating? If we're saying a single staircase sort of unit, for instance, we're trying to make sure that these are going to be accessible and available for folks. So yes and no, I guess, is maybe an unsatisfactory answer, but it's kind of the answer where we're saying, hey, we're talking to all layers of government to see like what opportunities are here, what's on the table for us to make sure that we can build something that's going to be safe and affordable, and something we can do at scale and quickly. And so, the opportunity is there for us to continue to advocate, but we're trying to also make sure that this is a commitment we can make within the current environment. And I think, as I see Chair Redmond standing, that is probably my time. Thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate your time. And appreciate you, all of your questions. And again, if anybody has further questions or follow-up, I am pretty easy to get a hold of. So please do reach out. We would love to chat more about this in the future. Thank you.
So I just want to, on behalf of all of us, thank you very much. We've been talking about this, and there's been meetings going on with CAOs and political people and developers for over a year. So I would have to point out that removing the HST from purpose-built affordable housing was a result of advocacy. So it's not to say that advocacy isn't necessary, but we cannot wait on the result of advocacy to change rules. We have to act now. And this is a project I think that so many of us are very, very excited about because it is transformative. And part of that transformation really is the scale. So I think we're one of the few communities that I've heard of where the developers are at the table pushing this idea forward. So it is all good news. And I'm sure there will be learnings along the way, but it is very exciting. Next up is a presentation with Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, and I'd ask Connie McDonald, Chief Communications and Strategy Officer, and Fazia Beg, Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for the Region of Waterloo, to kick this presentation off.
Yeah, just make yourself at home. Good. This might be a new record for a number of presenters in one presentation. Good afternoon, and thank you, everyone. For those I haven't met, I'm Connie McDonald. I'm the Chief Strategy and Communications Officer at the region, and I'm joined by my partner here, Fawzia Bag, the Director of the Office of Reconciliation, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the region. We're also joined by many community partners who are all working on actioning our shared plan for a safe and well Waterloo region. So today we're here to talk a little bit more about the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. We're not going to do a deep dive into the plan and the framework. We have done that at All Council before, and anyone who would like some follow-up conversation afterwards to sort of talk more about the process, Fawzi and I are very happy to sit down with you and have more of a conversation, and that'll give us a little bit more time today to speak with partners about the action that's happening today. So community safety and well-being plans are a legislative requirement of all municipalities under the Police Services Act. And through extensive engagement over the past number of years, we embarked on a community-led journey together. Fawzia? That was quick. I promised I would keep us on time today.
Okay. So the pressure's on, okay. So what you have in front of you is a picture of what safety and well-being means to community and what that vision really means. And what you'll see is that there are some core elements and there are some barriers and there are some conditions for safety and well-being. And so I just want to pause for a second because I had the opportunity this year to go to a conference where I learned about other community safety well-being plans across the country. And this one is different. And I think why it's different is because it was developed with community input, it was community-led, and it really is a shared vision with community of what safety and well-being means. So it really articulates all of the core elements that are needed, the conditions that are requirements for safety and well-being, the barriers that we need to acknowledge and address to move this work forward. It also talks about things like truth and reconciliation, anti-hate, anti-racism, anti-oppression, equity, diversity, and inclusion, social determinants of health, which are really central to this work. And it's not just pillars, but it's at the very heart. And then it acknowledges the circles of support, which are our chosen families. It acknowledges system accountability, which is something that we're doing here today in terms of holding ourselves accountable, and self-determined communities, which is something I'll touch more on when I share a little bit about the Upstream Fund. So this really is a way to anchor actions and work towards our shared vision of safety and well-being in the Waterloo region so that anyone who calls Waterloo region home feels safe, cared for, and has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you. I don't get along with clickers, so Connie's going to help me. So I said that one of the key things that we've heard loud and clear from community is taking action. So the first year of the plan was really about jumping in and taking action. So we're going to share a little bit about that with you today. The Upstream Fund. This just puts a smile to my face. The Upstream Fund is one example of how community safety well-being plan can really come to life. And a great example of self-determined communities and the power of self-determined communities in creating change. This is a community-led, system-supported process for shared governance, decision-making, and measuring impact. It really is an example for the community, by the community. And all of these folks are our recipients on the screen of the Upstream Fund. So the fund is anchored in priorities of the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan and has been operating for 2 funding cycles alongside the Community Capacity Building Fund. And already, in those 2 funding cycles, a diverse range of projects, initiatives, and organizations all have received funding, contributing to upstream approaches towards grassroots capacity building, safe and inclusive spaces in our community, investment in meaningful opportunities for youth, and much more. And there's some examples on there for you. And finally, this list is probably too small for all of you to read, but it actually is an accomplishment in that way as well, because it shows all of the different organizations, very diverse in this region, that have received funding over the 2 funding cycles. We've been able to bring these organizations together a couple of times a year to really lean in and grow, share, collaborate, and learn from each other, as well as really building on the spirit of that upstream approach. And now I'm going to turn over to Connie.
I'm just impressed I'm remembering to move the clicker. That's not a strength of mine. So the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan framework acknowledges and leverages good work that's already happening across the community. And one of my favorite statistics that I like to go back to when we talk about the framework that was built is in building it, we actually analyzed 180 existing plans related to community safety and well-being in Waterloo Region, like 180. There is lots of great work that's happening in this community. What this framework tries to do is knit all of them together into a cohesive plan that we're all working on together. The framework is also giving us the opportunity to have really strategic conversations with partners about working together in new ways, and also talking about like what we need to do differently as we're working together on so many different collaborative initiatives. A big part of the framework is about building that alignment and momentum, supporting the work of others, and also starting new priorities based on what we're hearing from the community. One of the great things about the framework is that it's built in a way that it can apply to any individual organization. So we've had great meetings with organizations, we've had good presentations with boards of directors of many nonprofits and other organizations about the feedback that we've heard from community and how they can apply the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan to their work. It's also built to serve as a guide and a grounding document for collective work and collaborative work. And that's really what we're here to focus on today. We could probably have every organization in Waterloo Region come up and talk about work that they're doing that aligns to this. We've been working with staff in each area municipality and staff in other systems, whether that's the school boards, universities, other nonprofits. I have some friends here from Waterloo Regional Police Service to sort of map all of the work that's going on in Waterloo Region that is building on the framework. These are just some of the examples. And I'm sure that you can think of lots more. So spoiler alert, because we're going to actually ask you that question a little bit later on about some of the work that you are aware of in your community that aligns with the framework and is moving a safe and well Waterloo Region forward. So keep thinking about that while we present. So one of the milestones on our Community Safety Wellbeing Plan journey was a symposium we held this summer that brought together more than 100 community leaders from grassroots organizations, systems, municipalities, and many others to talk about the top priorities that continue to surface in all of the different conversations that we're having. And three of the top priorities that came out and were talked about at that symposium were combating hate, creating safe and inclusive spaces, and addressing mental health needs together. Based on that conversation at the symposium, we actually came out with 4 priorities, adding addressing intimate partner violence, gender-based violence, and missing and murdered Indigenous women as a 4th priority in the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan. We have partners here today that are involved in each of the 4 priorities who are going to speak to a bit of work underway under each priority. I want to start by saying, though, that we're really at the beginning of building out these priorities and plans together, and we'll have more to share with you over the next year. I like to call this phase moving from a framework to an action plan. So we have a solid framework that's helped us to take some initial steps. Some of those you'll hear about today. We're now moving into more of a formal action plan with 4 priorities that we're all committed to together and that we're building action plans. This includes setting up community-led action tables for each of the 4 priorities. And in some cases where tables already exist, we're leveraging work underway to ensure alignment and make sure we're not duplicating anything. As you know, we have enough, we all have enough meetings. And so as much as we can use existing work, existing forums, existing tables, we're doing that so that we're focusing on action and less about the conversation, more about the action. So I'll turn it over to Fazia to introduce our first priority.
Combating hate. I just need to take a deep breath. So events, conflicts, and issues only continue to demonstrate how important it is for municipal governments and communities to better understand the complexities surrounding combating hate. We're really fortunate in this community to have organizations like the Coalition of Muslim Women who have started that work. The Coalition of Muslim Women approached area municipal councils here with recommendations to eradicate Islamophobia and other forms of hate. And through that, many critical actions and commitments have been made. One example of an action and commitment was the Anti-Hate Municipal Working Group, which consisted of regional staff, area municipal staff, and members of the Coalition of Muslim Women. One of the first orders of business for this working group was to look at how do we amend bylaws for regional properties, city properties, and properties across the region of Waterloo. And we started with the Regional Code of Use Bylaw 13-050, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with now, and went on an incredible journey to figure out how that can be done and what the outcomes and impacts of that could be. To share more on that, I'm going to invite Sarah Shafiq, Director of Programs and Services from the Coalition of Muslim Women, to speak to you about that work and the work that they're doing in this community.
Hello, everyone. I'll set my timer so that I don't go over. Good to be here. Good to see so many familiar faces, and thank you so much for this opportunity to share our work. There has been, there's a lot of good work being done in our community around hate and discrimination, and really proud to be contributing to that work. So CMW, we started our work addressing discrimination actually 13 years ago in response to, we call it the grandmother bill of the current unfortunate secularism law in Quebec, which determines and limits what Muslim women can wear or not wear. So it dictates what Muslim women can wear or not wear. So the work started, like our organization started with that sort of mandate. And the work on the bylaw started after the tragic Islamophobic killings of the Afzal family in 2021. We held healing circles, we received really heartfelt responses from the larger community, and we channeled that hurt and anger into action, and we held consultations to really see and understand what the community needs and wants. And one of the main gaps that came up was the street harassments that the community was facing. To address that, we took the recommendations and we went to all the councils, and many of the, we received really amazing response from the councils that we went to, and they supported us in passing motions around Islamophobia and racism. And for Region of Waterloo, we asked to address the hate, the street harassment and other aspects too, but this street harassment bit and amendment to the bylaw, this was then the council asked the staff to look into that, and the working group, as Fawzia was mentioning, was established. It was really a great experience to see all the communities and municipalities working together on this common a common work that for the time being it was passed passed by the region, but hopefully we'll bring it to other councils, and other councils will also do that work. So that groundwork has been done collectively. I tell you, it's very helpful for grassroots organizations to not sit at like 7 different tables, and that work was done on one table, and hopefully this will it will be taken up. So so this bylaw wasn't meant to just counter Islamophobia. It was done to counter address hate and discrimination for all marginalized communities under the Ontario Human Rights Code, as well as the unhoused community that was added in the last bit when at the ratification stage. It was really interesting that the bylaw was brought to the when the bylaw was brought to the council to ratify. It came in the limelight during the parental rights movement as well, and that process of democracy, really it was seeing democracy in action, where the community members came with a lot of concern, and the council really, listened to them and made amendments that, that it was a win-win situation. They were happy. We were, also really satisfied. It was beautiful to see that process, and we really appreciate that. So that So yeah, the partnership has been great in this process, and we really appreciate like the staff and others who were involved. Another sort of, there's a lot of work that we do, but another piece that really is connected to region is our anti-hate service, which is really a unique service definitely in the region, I think in Canada as well, because it's not just a reporting, it's not there to just report the hate and discrimination, cases of hate and discrimination, but also to provide one-on-one support. So that's something really unique and is needed, and unfortunately we are busy. It is important. Another important, so that unique feature is that we know hate crimes are underreported. That been over and over again. StatsCan and other research has shown that. So making it easier for the community and removing those barriers for the community to report is really important. And so this is a community-based system is helpful. And there are still reports that people are still not comfortable even reporting to us, but we are catching, all the systems are catching some, and that's the idea, to really facilitate that. Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's a critical, yeah, so I'll stop here. There's definitely a lot of more work being done, but yeah, those are the pieces, and that region also supported, and we wish to bring forward. So thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. And now I'd like to call up Sanjay Govindaraj, Director of Reconciliation, Equity, Accessibility, Diversity, and Inclusion, Paulina Rodriguez, Social Justice Advocate for the same team for the City of Waterloo.
Thank you, Fawzia. I don't want to go into all the stats about how hate has increased in this community. As we know, more recently in the last few years, especially after COVID-19, we've seen and experienced quite a lot of increased hate, not just in Waterloo, but across all municipalities and across Canada too. And I think one of the worrying trends, that we highlighted was, how do we really engage many of the equity denied groups in helping with solving, how do we address hate? And during our city's strategic planning process, we did a lot of engagement, especially with many of the groups who really didn't engage in previous strat planning. And I think one of the results that was very clear was the first big issues they shared with us was, how do we address hate? How can the municipality support it, and what are we doing about it? And with that feedback, I think it made it into our strategic plan for 2022 and 26, that we make it a priority at the City of Waterloo as to look at how do we comprehensively respond to this. I know we did look at bylaws, and I know the region, and we worked as a working group to look at how do we make bylaw changes, but that's one tool of many. And that's where we looked at how do we help, do much more, a better way of handling hate, and that was using a reconciliation and social justice way of handling it. And that's where we're trying to explore, is there other ways of kindness and understanding, and exploring ways in helping the community heal, especially after a hate incident has occurred. And we partnered with CJI to look at some of the policy work. I know Paulina will share more. And we're looking at involving all parts of the city internally to address both when an incident occurs, but also after an incident has happened. Paulina?
Thanks, Sanjay. And hi, everyone. It's a pleasure being here, and thanks for welcoming us in this space today to share what we're doing. So I think Sanjay mentioned a little bit about some of our initiatives at the City of Waterloo. One key initiative that the city's neighborhood team from Community Services developed is the Responding to Hate-Motivated Incidents Guide. The guide was created in collaboration with great partners such as Waterloo Region Police Services, Community Justice Initiatives, Coalition of Muslim Women, to support community members to address hate, respond in a supportive way when hate does happen, and build a more inclusive community. We translated the guide to make it more accessible, so it is available in English, Arabic, Tigrinya, and Spanish. And it includes information to help residents navigate reporting procedures and access resources that are available to them. Staff have been sharing the guide through community connections, including the neighborhood association, social media, and in conversations with community members. We hope that this guide serves as a tool for community members who are most likely to be impacted by hate and discrimination in our community. And it is also available for others in the community to use. In addition to the neighborhood guide, staff in the READY team have been working for about 2 years to track incidents that happen in the community, review city policies, processes, programs, facilities, and services to be more inclusive and welcoming to staff and community members. One key example of something that we are reviewing is our upcoming review of city policies to address identity-based hate in city property in alignment with the region's most recent bylaw update to the Code of Use bylaw. We created an internal staff team represents bylaw enforcement, community services, legal and human resources, as well as READY team to conduct a comprehensive review of relevant city policies. We will be exploring a non-punitive approach in partnership with organizations that focus on restorative justice, like I mentioned, community justice initiatives being one example, to ensure that incidents are appropriately addressed and that victims are supported throughout the process. This will include training and procedures for staff, enforcing those policies so that they are prepared when those updates happen. To further increase a sense of inclusion and safety, the READY team will also be exploring a community-wide campaign and messages of inclusion in various city facilities. This work will include engagement with various equity-denied groups who have been targeted most recently. The city is part of the Anti-Hate Working Group, and we will continue to collaborate with members of that group and the wider community on being proactive about addressing identity-based hate and engaging in public education about the harm and impacts of hate and discrimination. This work will be shared with other municipalities as well as the townships. So thank you so much for this time and for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulina and Sanjay. Now I'd like to call up Geraldine Stafford, Manager of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at Waterloo Regional Police Services. Geraldine.
Good afternoon, everyone. So what I'm here to speak today is about the police response and the police role in combating hate. So as I speak through my presentation, I want you to really think about an iceberg. Okay, so when you really think of hate, think of an iceberg. And I'm going to dial it back to first the definitions that we're speaking about. So a hate crime refers specifically to criminal offenses designated in the Criminal Code of Canada, such as public incitement of hatred. Often when people refer to something as a hate crime, the top of the iceberg, they may actually be referring to hate-motivated incidents or hate-motivated crimes. This is the bottom of the iceberg. A hate-motivated incident refers to an incident where an individual has demonstrated that hateful behavior towards someone on the basis of their identity, but without breaking any laws. Using a racial slur would be an example. A hate-motivated crime refers to a crime that includes a hate motivation, someone spray paints graffiti or a swastika on private property. Continued collaboration with our community partners is vital in combating hate within the region of Waterloo, as we recognize the need to move forward towards a consolidated reporting system which will provide the most accurate information available, allowing the police and community to develop initiatives to prevent and end hate incidents. So when we speak to reporting, we speak to Stats Canada. So every year, Stats Canada distributes the hate reporting state of the union, I guess, in Canada, and specifically to Waterloo Region. So every year, Waterloo Region is on within the top 15 in the past couple of years, the top 15 as the municipality reporting most hate. So we get on that report there's a lot of reasons we get on. There's lots of hate crime in Waterloo Region. We get on because there's more reporting within Waterloo Region. So there's a lot of reasons why we're on. The thing is, we need to ensure that the data that we're presenting to Stats Canada on a yearly basis is the most concise, most up-to-date, most collective information. Because once you have that fulsome understanding within your region of what's going on, then you will get the attention of federal, provincial monies in order to help combat things such as hate. So one of the things that we're working on, we've just actually, not just, but we've put out a application to the Ministry of the Solicitor General to, our plan actually set out a way that we can consolidate hate reporting within the region. So if we're only reporting police data, we're only getting one portion of the picture. Our community partners are doing really great work, but we got to figure out a way to consolidate this data. Because if we're only, like I said, reporting police data, we're only looking at one piece of the story. And plus, police data is on crime data. We need to look at the incidents. Those incidents are the tip of the iceberg. This is what is not reported when you see the stats can come down. You don't see those incidents. So we have to make sure we're getting the incidents from all of our community partners, and we are presenting the real story to Stats Canada. So hopefully, we keep our fingers crossed that we will get this funding from the Ministry of the Solicitor General to come together as a community and look at one mechanism for reporting hate. Understanding not everybody will report to police, so we're going to rely on our community partners to do the work to help us get that information and then bring the data into one consolidated way that then the police can take that report and report it federally to Stats Canada. So that's really what my presentation is about. We really appeal, you either have to get on the bus with this reporting or else you're not going to be counted. We're not going to be counted. We're not going to have the attention of what's really going on in the Waterloo region. Thank you. So I'll pass it over to Connie now.
Thank you so much, and thank you to our partners for coming here today to talk a bit about combating hate, which I know is something that's been a topic of discussion at all councils across Waterloo region and continues to be a really important priority for all of us. The next priority we're going to talk a bit more about is about creating safe and inclusive spaces. And through the development of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, we heard a lot about the need for safe spaces, and in particular, the need for culturally safe spaces for Indigenous communities. Our Director of Truth and Reconciliation, Paula Whitlow, couldn't be with us here today, but I'm happy to share a bit of information on her behalf. So last year, in partnership with all local municipalities through the Reconciliation Action Partnership, we hired an Indigenous consultant to build an Indigenous space needs assessment. And this looked at what space needs would be across the region through a number of different lenses. And one of the biggest takeaways from this initiative was the need to continue to build trust through facilitating communication, collaboration, and partnership among Indigenous and non-Indigenous services and organizations, and that we need to continue including community voices in our planning processes. So since the Space Needs Assessment, through the Reconciliation Action Partnership, we've been working across municipalities on new space opportunities. One example at the region is how we have partnered with Crow Shield Lodge to have their second healing lodge located at the Ken Sealing Waterloo Region Museum. Another example was providing space for Land Back Camp to host a community garden this summer at the Joseph Schneider House Museum. I'm pleased to be joined by a couple members of the Reconciliation Action Partnership today who are going to share a couple more examples of Indigenous space needs work across the region. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Poissant from the Township of North Dumfries and Denise McGoldrick from the City of Kitchener.
We weren't sure which one of us were going first. Thank you so much for inviting me today to speak about what's happening in North Dumfries. So the Township of North Dumfries is building a new park in one of our new subdivisions at the south end of Ayr. This new 1.51 hectare park will feature a playground, swing set, multi-purpose court, shade structure, picnic tables, benches, asphalt walking trails, splash pad, junior ball diamond, and an open play space. So lots of fun for everyone. When it came time for council to choose a name, several suggestions were provided by staff. One of the names was Skaana Park. This is a Mohawk word for peace. As we have learned, Indigenous languages are not only methods of communication, but also extensive and complex systems of knowledge that have developed over millennia. They are central to the identity of Indigenous peoples, the preservation of their cultures, worldviews, and visions and expression of self-determination. We wanted to honor that by naming one of our parks an Indigenous word, and what better word than peace? Peace is one of the central themes in the Haudenosaunee philosophy. It is a great way to describe how Haudenosaunee people live, how they are to treat each other within their communities, and how they engage with people outside of their communities, how they run their traditional government. Future plans for Skalnaw Park will include Indigenous art and educational signage. As we all know, parks contribute to community identity, provide active and passive recreational opportunities, appeal to all ages, contribute to the health and wellness of a community, and create valuable green space. We look forward to enhancing those benefits with teaching the community about the original caretakers of the land.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks, Connie, for the invitation to present today. One of the things that I really value about the Reconciliation Action Partnership is the way we learn from each other and from community. So I'm here to share information on an Indigenous land-based futurity project called Wajitamin. And Wajitamin is a partnership between White Owl Native Ancestry, Wish-Dawanawak, Urban Indigenous Garden Collective, Conestoga College, and the City of Kitchener. And the project site is located adjacent to the Grand River in the Pioneer Tower area of Kitchener. It involves the innovative development and application of urban land co-management strategies rooted in traditional Indigenous land-based practices and knowledges. This work builds on work already accomplished by local grassroots Indigenous community organization and provides enhanced coordinated effort among community partners to support land restoration that secures and produces sustainable traditional foods and medicines, increases local biodiversity through habitat restoration and reintroduction of native species, builds community capacity, mobilizes knowledge, and exercises land co-management practices. And the land restoration efforts will be phased over several years, and this year, 2023, was the first year of working on the land and has included the establishment of food plots, planting of a fruit orchard, hosting a culture camp, ceremonial space creation, and habitat restoration, including prairie grass savanna. The knowledge and partnership developed through the Wajitamin project is a wonderful example of creating welcoming spaces through a two-eyed seeing approach that is a model that can be used in other space-based projects in the region. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Connie.
Thank you so much, and to both of you for just giving us a sense of just two projects that are happening across the region as a result of the work of the Reconciliation Action Partnership. Stay tuned, because I think there's lots more to come. So the next priority that we'll address today, I'm sure is no surprise to anyone in this room. Addressing mental health needs continues to be a top priority in every single conversation that we have with community and all of our partners. At the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan Symposium that we held this summer, we had some really good discussions about the need for better coordinated outreach and new response models. And so as part of the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan, we've been working with our partners in Ontario health teams and mental health organizations on collaborative initiatives that are designed to explore better access and new response models. We're joined today by Rhonda Nichols, a director from Waterloo Region Public Health, and Steve Cusum, who I'll allow to introduce himself to talk about one initiative under this plan, the Alternative Destination Clinic.
Thanks, Connie. There are many, many mental health and addiction projects currently happening in the region. We have heard from the community the need is now more than ever, and there is a significant commitment to addressing mental health and addictions. Today, Steve and I are going to talk about one of the initiatives, the Alternate Destination Clinic, or the Integrated Crisis Care Clinic, as it really demonstrates the power of community collaboration, which is the essence of the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan. Listening, learning, and taking action together. It really has demonstrated what we can do when we all work together. This conversation actually started many years ago with a number of partners across our region, but then the pandemic hit, and as with all things, the conversation paused. About a year ago, several partners got together and took up that conversation again. We know that the hospital emergency departments are not the place for our residents that are seeking care for mental health and addiction challenges. We also know that our emergency services, such as police and paramedics, are not the best professionals to be caring for our residents in mental health and addiction crises. We also know that our system is very complex and very confusing, and you're going to hear a little bit about that firsthand from Steve in a moment. There was no funding for this model available
but that didn't matter. The willingness and determination of our system partners to make things better for our residents won overall. In true Region of Waterloo barn-raising style, the partners decided that we needed to make it happen. The commitment to doing what's right for our community is outstanding. We've moved from an idea to a concept to service design and hopefully in the new year implementation, and that conversation only started a year ago. There will be eventually an ask to the province for funding for this model. But in the meantime, the providers are working together to move services around into a model that can be easily accessed by our residents. They're quilting together something new for our community. Addressing mental health and addictions is not an issue for just one sector to solve. It is all of our responsibility. It requires a whole of community response. I'm going to turn it over to Steve to talk about his experience as leading some of this work in our community.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rhonda. My name is Steve Kesem. My wife and I have 2 sons who we are so proud of. I'm a dad. I'm also a caregiver with lived experience who is involved in healthcare advocacy with our local hospital, at various levels of government. I also team lead a peer-to-peer parent support group regionally called the Association of Parent Support Groups in Ontario. KW Cambridge is one of 10 chapters in the province. I'm here to talk about the struggles of families in trying to figure out where to get help for our loved ones and why this work is so important to all of us. Our quest to get help for our son included reaching out to numerous organizations, both mental health and addiction related, being sent reams of paper to read, which we still have in a shopping bag upstairs in the office, but having no time to read it as we were continuously in crisis. It wasn't until we joined the parent support group that we finally received simple, practical tips and solutions to try. This resulted in my wife and I slowly starting to get our life back and our relationship as well. They also taught us how to set some simple boundaries, which our son follows to this very day. These are the kinds of resources, tips, and solutions that we share with the parents in our support group. Numerous parents in our support group continue to experience these same problems today. Where do they go to get help? It's scary that my wife and I are the go-to coaches in the group when it comes to helping them find mental health and addiction resources. I'm excited and pleased to be co-chair of the steering committee of the Alternate Destination Clinic project. This project is so important to those in their families who struggle with mental health and addiction issues, as well as acquired brain injury issues whose diagnosis was just recently added to our family story. The aim of the clinic's model is to provide people with access to the services they need, when, where, and how they need them the most. This collaborative model looks at new ways to respond to mental health and addiction crisis by providing an alternate destination for individuals in crisis other than the hospital emergency department. In June 2023, a community steering committee was established with over 20 service providers and individuals and caregivers with lived experience. The service providers include Community Healthcare in KW, Horizon Wellbeing, the Canadian Mental Health Association Waterloo Wellington, Lang's Primary Care, Lutherwood, Porchlight, and Threshold Homes and Supports. Representatives from the Cambridge, North Dumfries, and KW4 Ontario Health teams, as well as all 3 hospitals, paramedic and Waterloo Regional Police Services are all on the committee. Equally important are the 8 community members with caregiver and lived experience, 3 of us from my parent support group. Other organizations, including the Working Center, House of Friendship, and Trevor's Independence are all aware of and have a strong interest in our project. Finally, we also have very strong support from public health, which we're so grateful for. The collaboration among the steering committee members has been amazing to watch and an important part of this work. As the steering committee moves into implementation, the goal is to open 2 sites, one in each Ontario Health Team area that would serve all residents. These sites will provide a safe space for mental health and addiction support with referral pathways both in and out of the clinics. For example, walk-ins, referrals, paramedic service, and police transport, with referrals to health service providers when they leave the clinic. The Ontario Health Teams, service providers, and individuals and caregivers with lived experience are working together collaboratively to design the 2 clinics. Just circling back to my wife and I struggling to find resources to help our son. I'm a semi-intelligent CPA, although some might argue that point. Think of those who may be less fortunate than us, those who live in more vulnerable neighborhoods, newcomers struggling to understand our healthcare system, those without a primary care physician, those who live rough. They are why this project and a focus on mental health and addictions is so important. They are why I and others like me do what we do for that family coming in after us. You know, I didn't sign up to speak to you here today. I didn't sign up to be involved in the ADC project, to do the other advocacy work that I do, to team lead the parent support group. All I signed up for was to be a dad. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Rhonda, and thank you, Steve, for sharing that heartfelt experience and all the work that you're doing. It's incredible. Thank you. So the fourth and final priority, this is one that came out of community need and advocacy as well, post-symposium, and this is the priority area of gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, and missing and murdered Indigenous women. Municipalities in Waterloo region have joined other municipalities across Canada in declaring intimate partner violence and violence against women an epidemic. The region has also become the only and first municipality to declare violence against Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA an epidemic as well. I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Hutton from the Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo region to share more about the work that they're doing to fight this epidemic.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. As Fazia mentioned, I'm Jennifer Hutton, CEO of Women's Crisis Services. We have 2 emergency shelters, one in Kitchener and Selma House, and one in Cambridge, Haven House, as well as regional outreach services. First off, I want to thank you for all your work and support around declaring intimate partner violence an epidemic. Now, well over 60 municipalities have made this declaration, with our neighbors in Guelph most recently following suit. This declaration has already moved from symbolism to action by including intimate partner violence and gender-based violence as a standalone pillar in the community safety and well-being plan. A recent reminder of the need for this declaration came at the end of last month, when the Ontario Association of Interval and Transition Houses reported that 62 women and girls were killed in Ontario within the last year. Sadly, this was an increase over the prior year. Shifting gears to the work that's happening locally to address this epidemic, we have 2 well-established committees leading the work around intimate partner violence and gender-based violence for our region. Firstly, the Family Violence Project, which has been in existence since 2006, focusing on the issue of intimate partner violence or domestic violence that consists of 9 partner agencies such as Waterloo Regional Police, Camino, Family and Children's Services, Sexual Assault, Domestic Violence Team, just to name a few. We also have a gender-based violence strategy table, a newer but much needed initiative that is focused on addressing the larger issue of gender-based violence with service coordinating committees addressing sexual assault, anti-human trafficking, and domestic violence. This table includes upwards of 20 different organizations. For example, representatives from both YWs, Porchlight, White Owl, the Coalition of Muslim Women, rural counseling agencies and resource centers, John Howard Society, post-secondary institutions, and that's just to name a handful. These initiatives are focused on improving services for survivors, collaboration, wraparound support, advocacy, and system change with a goal to eradicate violence against women, gender diverse, and two-spirited individuals using an intersectional feminist lens. I want to quickly highlight one initiative that's showing some promising data that's occurring through the Family Violence Project. The Early Intervention Program pairs an outreach worker from Women's Crisis Services with an intimate partner violence detective from police, who together respond to families that have at least 2 police service calls in 2 months, with no charges having been laid. This pilot program ran from June 2022 to July 2023. 340 couples received the support. After the intervention, there was a reduction in further service calls to police of upwards of 46%. It is noteworthy that these reductions stayed stable over time of at least 6 months. Due to the initial success, we have committed to continuing with this project. However, we know many individuals do not and will not contact the police. So this is just one program that I highlight. There is much work and discussions occurring around prevention and upstream approaches, how we can work better together in supporting equity-deserving groups in culturally responsive ways. Of course, there's much discussion about affordable housing, as well as how we engage men and boys and add much-needed support for male-identified offenders. Thanks so much for your time, and I'll pass it over to Fazia.
Thanks, Jennifer. Paula Whitlow couldn't be with us here today, but did put a few comments together to talk a little bit about the missing and murdered Indigenous women part of this priority. So I'll read this from her. In many Indigenous cultures, women held the power and were the strength within their clans and nations. Through colonialism, women were subjugated, as evident today in the devastating and horrific violent statistics that exist today. Indigenous women, 2S LGBTQIA+, go missing and are murdered 3 to 5 times on average than any other race of women in this country. It is imperative resources are put in place and agencies and organizations work together to ensure the most vulnerable people in our community have the safety and security that every citizen should be entitled to. So now I'm going to turn it over to Connie.
Whew, we're getting to the end. I hope that this has given you a bit of the depth and breadth and complexity of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan and a lot of the different partners that are working together. So when it's this complex and there's this many moving pieces and the stakes are this high, how do we make sure it's successful? I'm going to put in the hot seat next. Erin Mathias, Inspector of Community Safety and Wellbeing Partnerships with the Waterloo Regional Police Service, who's going to talk a little bit about next steps and our critical success factors.
Well, good afternoon. Really grateful for the opportunity to speak to you today, excuse me, about some forward-looking elements in critical success factors in this plan. In October, I had the pleasure of joining Fazia in Regina and presenting at the Canadian Municipal Network on Crime Prevention National Conference. Beyond sharing some of the information that you've seen today and showcasing the progressive approach of the region of Waterloo in this plan, we were able to network with academic experts in this field, representatives from all levels of government, and a multitude of community agencies doing the work to make their community safe and well. As I reflect back on some of the information that was shared, there's a few key takeaways. Collaboration is vital as these concepts are new and evolving. This work is rewarding and challenging. And realizing results will take time and will take a commitment to progress through relentless incrementalism. With this in mind, it's important to recognize that the success of this plan is not dependent on any one system or one agency, but rather will take our collective and combined efforts to better align our work, develop pathways from systems to upstream resources, and implement evidence-based practices, all with the aim of improving outcomes for the members of our community. To speak to resourcing shared work, as an invested systems partner, the Police Service looks forward to contributing membership throughout the framework of the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan and act as a collaborative partner with systems and community. I'm pleased to be part of the core support team that will help build out priority action tables related to the priorities you've seen today and provide ongoing support to this framework with members of the READY team and other partners. This opportunity provided by the opportunity provided by the action table model is the ability to address our designated priorities as a team, centralizing our collective expertise and lived experiences to drive progress. They provide an open forum to review processes alongside partners, identify opportunities to optimize areas of shared work and service delivery. This is reflective of some of the ongoing work that our team has undertaken as we adopt the concepts of community safety and well-being into the Waterloo Regional Police Service, and we are continually looking for ways to innovate our service delivery. Data gathering is fundamental to this work. Data gathering and sharing is fundamental to this work and represents our ability to be responsive to community needs, identify new trends, and use the information to help inform community-based solutions, like we've heard of today with the Alternative Destinations Clinic, and create a collective impact. We know that the priorities outlined here today are complex issues, and the solutions that we pursue need to reflect that. Each action table will identify sources of data, gaps in information to determine how they can best be analyzed through individual and collective outcomes. Moving together under a common agenda, teams will develop shared measurements, coordinate and align their activities while maintaining open lines of communication. And all these activities will be supported through the governance structure of this plan. Lastly, the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan team is working to develop clear outcomes and reporting mechanisms. This speaks to the transparency and accountability that we wish to demonstrate to our partners and our community members. By establishing key indicators, goals, and outcomes, we'll communicate our progress through data, community results, and feedback. These outcomes will help to inform decision-making, develop best practice, and to assist our overall advocacy to resourcing these priorities. By carefully and thoughtfully implementing these elements, we'll be able to articulate clear outcomes, tell the story of our collective work and our current state, while remaining accountable to the values established by our community that are reflected in the framework of this plan. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Aaron, and a huge thank you to everyone who's joined us here today. When we asked them if they wanted to give a presentation to every municipally elected official in Waterloo Region, there was a bit of a deep breath, and then absolutely. So thanks to everyone for coming. I'm kind of in the chair's hands because we're a little bit short on time here. We did have a couple questions for you. There is a Mentimeter. You're welcome to scan that and kind of put some answers in while we perhaps take a couple questions and then wrap up. And Tim Brubaker has a roving mic.
There. Okay. Thank you for educating us on what's going on, the work that's being done, and the progress in various aspects of the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan. You spoke a lot about collaboration and working together, and that is absolutely fundamental in this. I'm just wondering where in this picture the educational institutions fit in, thinking of post-secondary, even Waterloo Region District School Board, the Catholic School Board, if they are part of conversations, and specifically thinking about some of the data. As we know, there's been instances within this region at our educational institutions. Thanks.
Great, and thank you for the question. So the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan is governed by a number of different committees. So one is a steering committee, and at that steering committee level, there's a bunch of different community partners, including representation from the University of Waterloo. We also have an advisory committee, and at the advisory committee are representatives from both of the school boards. And so they were instrumental in developing the framework and also sit involved in implementation. I would say that part of what we're trying to work towards as we create the action tables is how do we bring more of those partners into the action pieces that we're working on together.
My turn. Hi. I just want to thank you. You're doing an amazing job. I know we all have visions and dreams of a better world. You breathe life into it. And every time you speak, I think of that person that's in a dark room alone with no door or window. And you make a door and you open a window for them. And I want to thank you so very much because what you do and your initiative will change our world. And I hope in my lifetime. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions. Deb, do you want to put up the results just to give people a sneak peek? Okay, great. Well, we'll keep that open, so you're welcome to continue to respond to that. And just a big thank you on behalf of the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan folks up here for your time and patience as we got through all this content today. So thank you very much.
So I'll just let all the presenters take their seats. I think it was one of those, I don't know, has anyone been to a concert where there were more people in the band than in the audience? That's kind of what it felt like to me. But I think it's a wonderful physical illustration of it does take a community, and this is a wonderful initiative, and it spreads through every corner of our region, and I think that came through loud and clear. Fabulous leadership. Thank you very much. Fabulous partnerships and collaboration, which is absolutely fundamental to moving forward. The next All Councils meeting is June 21st, 2024, and I think it'll probably get here a lot faster than any of us anticipate. I want to thank everybody for joining us here in the chamber and online today. There's a lot of exciting and collaborative projects happening these days, and I look forward to seeing them play out in 2024. I hope you will be able to join us now for a small reception in the lobby. And again, thank you all for coming, and I know that both Build Now and Community Safety and Wellbeing will help define us as we go forward in a very positive way as a community. Thank you, and I will see you in the lobby.